If you haven't joined us before, we'd like to welcome you all out to our Small Business Town Hall. We have questions regarding COVID-19. If you have any questions, please submit them in our chat. Panelists will answer questions one by one, and so if it may take us a minute to get to your question, but please opt your questions there. We're streaming live to Facebook. We'd like to welcome all our viewers on Facebook today as well, and say thank you for joining us again today. My name is Mike Bindrup. I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm a research associate with the University of Nevada Reno Extension Program. And joining me today are my co-patriots, Mr. Juan Salas, Business Development Advisor extraordinaire. His specialties are taxes. He's also an enrolled agent with IRS, which means he has the answers. You can actually talk to him. That's a good thing. And Ms. Reyna Mendez, she's our business development instructor with Extension. Her specialties are in marketing and international trade. Welcome, Reyna. Thank you for joining us too.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Then we have Mr. Kevin Johnson with us. Well, sorry, I got out of order. Alfredo Cedeño, first and foremost. He's our outreach marketing specialist for the SBA. Specialties are marketing and business processes. And Kevin Johnson is an attorney, graduated from UNLV Law. Woohoo! Very good. We love Boyd. Specialties of estate planning, litigation, and gaming. And currently he's with Cohen Johnson Parker Edwards. Wow, you got your number 2 there. Good job.
That's
nice.
Not me. That refers to somebody else.
Oh, that's somebody else. Oh man, I was stepping. Well, you know what? When it changes, you don't even have to change the signs. That's
exactly.
So first and foremost, we're going to go through a quick update from the SBA. We're going to talk about the SBA loan programs. And Alfredo, take it away.
Sure, and I apologize for not having my camera on. It's not letting me turn it on, but hopefully, I'm sure you can hear me. So here I am. So as far as updates with PPP, yeah, there's a couple of updates, and there's a couple of updates with EIDL. Let me just back it up real quick and let your viewers know about the PPP program. So it's available now. It's the Paycheck Protection Program. It's a forgivable loan. In order to qualify, you would need to show that a 25 and at least 25% reduction in annual revenue in revenue from any quarter in 2020 compared to that same quarter in 2019. You have to have been in business since at least February 15th, 2020. How do you apply for PPP? Well, you go to a lender, you go to a bank, you apply through them, and then they contact us and we secure the loan. Once you get your funds, you have between 8 and 24 weeks to use the funds. You would then go back to your lender, back to the bank, and submit a request for forgiveness. We would then approve it, and then it's done. Simple as that. So a couple new things with PPP. The SBA is now accepting second draw PPP applications from 2021 first draw borrowers. What that means is if in 2021 you hadn't applied for PPP yet as a business and you got the first round of PPP this year, you would now be eligible, actually just now, you'd be eligible to apply for the second draw PPP. And unfortunately, you wouldn't get your money until you used all of your first round PPP funds, but at least now we know we are seeing borrowers do this. They're taking their second draw PPP after taking their first draw this year. So that's good news. Last day to apply, however, for now is the 31st of March. They're talking about extending that date up until the 31st of May, possibly the 31st of June. But that's all speculation up until this point. So for now, let's just say it's March 31st. Let's see. So that's with PPP. Oh, so one more thing with PPP. If you happen to be a venue operator and you are shuttered, you would qualify for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. And now we've removed the restriction of being able to apply for both. Now you can apply for PPP and you can apply for SVOG, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant at the same time. It's not one or the other anymore. That has changed. It's very recent. However, the SVOG is not available as of yet. They're talking maybe beginning of April, but we don't have a date yet as to when that's going to be available. Okay, that's PPP and that's SVOG. So something else. So the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is still available. It's still available until the 31st of December. It is a 30-year loan at 3.75%. What has changed is the first payment is now deferred if you've gotten it this year for 18 months. If you already have the loan, if you got it last year, the EIDL, your first payment would have been due soon this year. We extended it another 12 months. So now your first payment for the EIDL, if you received it last year, is not due for 24 months. We're talking 2 years here. So that's also good news, gives business owners a little bit of some extra time there to catch up on their bills and start paying on this loan. That is not forgivable. Go ahead.
Is that something that they're going to get an email, or should they just assume that it's going to be extended? How's it work?
I don't know what the communications look like yet, but I know that as soon as you get that EIDL, we send you documents showing you when your payments are going to start being due. So I'm guessing it's going to probably be an email.
Juan, I've had a couple of clients reach out to me, and they told me that they did get an email concerning the EIDL. So
great.
I think that's how they're doing it for eligibility now.
There we go.
Yes. No, we're always happy to bring two sides of the information. We hear from the clients, not the clients, but the community, the business community, and also we hear from the organizations. So definitely we can match the information from one side to the other.
Yeah, that's good first-hand information right there. Yeah, so I can give you from my perspective, from the SBA's perspective, but yeah, to get it from the borrower's perspective is even more valuable, maybe.
Thank you, Alfredo.
You're welcome,
Alfredo.
Thanks.
And we have his phone number right here on the panel, 702-388-6611. If you want to reach them. Wonderful team, SBA. So thank you.
Absolutely. We can't say enough about the support we get from SBA on our program here, but just in general for the small business community. So thank you very much, Alfredo, for your continuing support, and please let everybody at your office know. Thank you as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for that knowledge. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, next up, I told you we have a good show today, and we got Kevin Johnson in. And Kevin, I got a little bio on you, so bear with me and correct any lies that I tell. All right. So Kevin Johnson was born and raised in Las Vegas. Where'd you go to high school, Kevin?
Green Valley High School.
Green Valley. Nice. I went to Valley High School, so go Las Vegas, right? After graduating high school, Kevin attended Brigham Young University for a year before moving to Paraguay for 2 years, where he learned Spanish. Excellent. Our buddy Marcel is from Paraguay.
Really?
Yeah, Marcel with business and industry. Upon coming stateside, Kevin graduated with a bachelor's degree in Latin American Studies and Spanish from BYU. Then he attended law school at UNLV before being admitted to the Nevada bar. During law school, Kevin had an externship with federal magistrate judge Carl Hoffman, earned a Cali Award for the highest grade in his class, and made the dean's list. That was pretty good for law school. Not bad. Since graduation, Kevin has been published in the Nevada Gaming Law Journal. Kevin's currently employed with Cohen Johnson Parker Edwards and practices in the areas of estate planning, litigation, and gaming. Kevin's helped numerous clients prepare for the future and defend themselves against lawsuits when they arise. When not working, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 kids, seeing movies, and cheering on the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Welcome, Kevin, our local boy from Green Valley High School, gone big. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
How's that for an intro?
That's pretty good. I do need to update it, though. I have 3 kids now. I had a baby born in November.
Flack about that if the wife's watching. So you forgot our last child. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well,
anyway, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I enjoy doing things like this, classes like this, because there's nothing worse than when somebody comes to see me because they have a problem and it's too late to plan. It's too late to have set up something that may or may not have helped them. So I hope that this can be of use to those who are watching and that you can get an idea where you need to be. Oh, go ahead.
And Kevin, right now everybody is, switching, trying to come up, being creative, being, entrepreneur. So right now there's a lot of people jumping into the entrepreneurship. And that's a very common question that they have. Do I need an LLC for my business? Right. We know that it's easy to in the eyes of the government, the IRS, it's very easy to just start a business. You know, you can, and the easiest way is to begin with a sole proprietorship. But, you know, sole proprietorship, as you can explain more, has its pros, has its cons. Tell us a little bit about the experiences that you have.
Yeah. So the type of business that you form is really going to depend on what exactly you're doing. Generally speaking, an LLC is going to be a good thing for most people, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So the first type of business, and what's most common that people often default into, is what we call a sole proprietorship. And the reason why it's so common is because it's the easiest to start. It's just you. You have no kind of business entity. You should register with the state, but a lot of people don't even do that. You're opening up your lemonade stand on the corner, as an example. It's just you. There's no difference between you and your business. And the cons of this type of business are fairly numerous. Number one, there's unlimited liability here. So if anything goes wrong, you and your business are one and the same. So you are going to be the person who gets sued if something happens. Also, it's difficult to bring in any kind of investment, any kind of partners. If for whatever reason somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I like your lemonade stand. I'd like to help you expand that." It's difficult to do as a sole proprietorship. You don't really have any interest that you can sell. But there are some pros as well. They are easy to set up. They are cheap. The registration is cheap and easy. It's not going to have much effect, if any, on your taxes. It's something that you could talk about, Juan, but so in theory, there are certain businesses that could be just fine as a sole proprietorship if your possible sources of liability, which we're going to talk about in a second here, are minimal. If you're not employing anybody, if you're not really selling a product, if you're not in a public space really at all, where people are entering your business and could slip and fall, you know, your liability is going to be fairly minimal, and you could maybe be served with a sole proprietorship. Now, I generally would advise against that because there's a better way that we'll get to in a second here. And talking about other kinds of entities, we have the corporation that everyone is familiar with. Everyone knows about corporations, knows about McDonald's and Walmart and these big companies. And corporations are very good in some areas. They are very strong in terms of liability protection, because if something happens, say when you're walking into a Walmart store, you are not going to be able to sue the general manager of that store or the CEO of Walmart. You can only sue Walmart itself. And the same thing works for individuals who form corporations. They're generally only going to be able to sue the corporation itself. However, with corporations, there are some downsides as well. They are complicated. They require bylaws and annual meetings, and they require certain positions like a president and a secretary and a treasurer and a director. And there are a lot more pitfalls that you can fall into that will weaken your legal protections by not following what we call the forms of the legal forms of the business.
Kevin, I had a quick question.
Yes.
Isn't it, wouldn't you rather, as an attorney, if you had a client come in, wouldn't you rather have a client come in that's a sole proprietor and compliant than they have a corporate structure and they're just not keeping up with the paperwork, right?
Right. That's, as an attorney, that's going to be the way that I try and get through a corporation anyway, is to show the judge, look, Your Honor, they're not following the corporate forms. They're mixing everything up in terms of personal expenses and business expenses. So frankly, Your Honor, you should set this corporate shell aside. And so if you do have a corporation, but you're just a corporation in name, you just set it up because somebody told you should do that one day, you effectively are a sole proprietorship.
Yep. So you hear that, folks? If you are running this like your own personal piggy bank on a corporation, an attorney just told you I look for that specifically if I'm going after somebody to say, hey, that's an easy one. Can you please set this aside? They're not running this they're not running a business here, right? You're violating the rules. You have to be in compliance.
And the other big con of a corporation is that when it comes tax time, you effectively have to pay taxes twice, and because the corporation has to file its own taxes, and then you have to file your personal taxes, which will include your salary or your dividends or wherever you're paying yourself in the corporation. And that's not a big deal if you're a huge company, but if it's just you and your corporation, you're really just paying taxes twice. On the other end of the spectrum from corporations, we have partnerships. And partnerships have some pros in that they're easier to set up and maintain and simpler to run, but they have some cons as well in that they don't offer you any kind of protection. And not only do they not offer you any protection, but they can compound your liability because in a partnership, the debts and liability of one partner spread to all the other partners. And you can even see this happen if it's something that is, if one partner goes off the rails and it's something that's outside the scope of the business. So you're operating a restaurant and you discover one of the partners is laundering money or doing something illegal or whatever, that can come back on you all. And so partnerships are kind of dangerous, but they are more simple and they aren't taxed double like corporations are. And so for a long time, you had this kind of issue where on the one hand, you had protection, but it was more complicated. On the other hand, you didn't have that protection, but it was more feasible for most people to have a partnership. And so to solve this issue and to create something kind of in the middle, states, every state, I believe, as far as I know, certainly Nevada, and came up with something called the limited liability company, or the LLC. And this is a very useful structure for people to use because it has protections like a corporation does, nearly the same protections, and it is easier to set up and operate, and it can enjoy some of the benefits of a partnership, especially when it comes to tax time. And so to answer the original question, do I need an LLC for my business? I would say yes, if you are concerned at all about any kind of liability, and or you are starting a business with partners, an LLC can be a really good way to do that.
Kevin, does anybody nowadays, is the traditional structure of a partnership dead? When's the last time you filed an actual partnership?
It is not entirely dead. There is something called a limited liability partnership that fixes the problem a little bit.
Okay.
Because it allows for limited partners who, in exchange for limited involvement in the business, have limited liability. So basically silent partners. It allows you to have people who are just going to put money in, and in exchange, they get some protection. You do see that sometimes.
Can LLCs partner? Can you have two LLCs that partner as partners?
Yeah, you can, an LLC can hold an interest in a corporation. It can hold an interest in a partnership.
Okay.
It can own a trust. It can do
a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And there are certain areas that require certain entities. You'd have to ask a specialist about this, but for instance, certain type of medical practices and dental practices, their governing boards will require them to set themselves up in certain ways. And you see partnerships.
Oh yeah, like you can't own a medical practice without being a doctor license, or you can't own a law firm without being an attorney.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even setting up an LLC, even if you decide that your business needs to have an LLC because you have employees, or because you're working in somebody else's space and you're worried about, somebody hurting themselves or whatever, you want to make sure that you do things correctly, because that will strengthen your LLC. And there are two principal ways you can do that. Number one, you want to make sure that you have everything in writing in terms of an operating agreement, especially if you have partners, especially if there's more than one of you. And LLCs are useful because one of the reasons they're especially useful is because they allow you to separate ownership and control to a degree. So you can, and the way you do that is by having members and managers. And they could be the same person or they could be different. So this allows you to, for instance, have partners and divide up the membership interest in an LLC, while at the same time it allows you to also, for instance, hire somebody to be your person on the ground who could be a manager in the business and can make certain decisions, but can't make big decisions that would be left to the members.
Now, Kevin, I was going to say, I had several clients that would come in to see me at the Small Business Development Center, and they'd say, my partner and I had a fight, and he went and liquidated our bank account. And I'd say, well, how did that happen? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, what's your operating agreement say? And he goes, I don't remember like what it said, right? So there's probably some stipulations you should put in there for like incurring debt, maybe opening, closing accounts. You can put in your operating agreement, there needs to be, any check over $250 has to be approved. It has to have 2 signatures. You can have stuff like that in there. And the bank keeps a copy of this so that precisely this type of stuff doesn't happen, right?
Right. And, there's a lot of other things you could do in an operating agreement that are helpful. You can, for instance, let's say you have an LLC and you're going to bring on a silent partner or 2 silent partners. You can specify, for instance, that they're going to have in exchange for whatever they give you 30% of the business and you're going to have 70%. And you can specify that all certain decisions have to be made by 70% of the members, i.e. you, or more, if the other people need to have a say as well. So there really is a lot of different ways that you can structure this to make sure things operate the way that you would like them to.
Absolutely. And Kevin, I just want to say a lot of people, you can file your LLC yourself, right? Traditionally, we had to go to law firms for this, see an attorney for it. But where you really need to see an attorney for it is your operating agreement. You have to make sure, especially if you have a partner or 2, you want to make sure that that your interests are protected and your attorney is absolutely valuable in this area. Like it's worth paying just even a consultation on this and having the attorney look this over. I think that's where I think a lot of people don't realize that with when they're setting up their structures is that operating agreement or your when anybody can file the corporate papers, but setting it up so that you protect your interest, that's why you need your attorney involved. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. Yeah, you can set up an LLC fairly easily. It'll cost you $425. You can do it online. But like you said, you want to make sure that you have your ducks in a row, because what often happens when people come to me, like they come to you with problems, is they say so and so is doing this, or what happens next, and the first thing I'll ask is, well, what does the operating agreement say? And they either don't have one, or they don't know, or it doesn't say.
We did it on LegalZoom and it's generic. Whatever.
Right. Doesn't say.
And if you have. The other consideration is we're a community property state in Nevada, right? And if you have you have multiple partners and some are married and some aren't, what happens if a partner divorces, right? Their spouse is entitled to half of their share of the interest in that business. And so can they come in and sit at the table and make decisions? You better stipulate that stuff because it could happen. Or even dumb stuff you don't think about, like what's the valuation of the business? Like what do we all agree that the valuation of the business is? I had an attorney one time that said, every year I make the partners sit down and designate a value, or you can do this quarterly or whatever. The business is worth X, right? And if anybody leaves or cashes out or dies during this period of time, that's our basis number we're going to use. So there's no squabbling when that comes back and somebody says, no, I think it's worth $1 million. And somebody says, no, it's worth 100,000. That's a lot of legal headache. If you have a partner that dies, it's a lot of problems in a business, or gets sick or gets in a car wreck or whatever.
Yeah. And a lot of operating agreements will specify, these are, if any one of these events happens, a bankruptcy, a divorce, a death, whatever, this is what happens. Either the partners have the first right of refusal to buy the share in the business, or, we bring in an independent third party to evaluate the business, or we agree that business is worth whatever. Those are all things that can and should be spelled out in an operating agreement. The other thing that's especially important, again, because this is how you attack an LLC, is you need to make sure that you run it as a business, that you keep it separate. A lot of times people get a little sloppy and they either don't have a business account for their LLC, they just have an LLC, or they have a business account that is all mixed up with their personal life. So they're paying their personal expenses out of the business account or business expenses with their personal card, and it's all mixed up. And that is one of the factors that the court evaluates in deciding whether to pierce the protections of an LLC, is to say, look, is there a commingling of funds here? You know, I'm going to, as an attorney, you know, I may do some discovery and then go show the court, look, you know, he paid his mortgage payment out of his business account, and he's buying his inventory with his personal credit card to get the miles. And, you know, it's all mixed up. And so that, you know, is one reason you should set this LLC aside and allow me to go after this person individually.
I saw Juan cringe, you know, when you said pay your mortgage out of your business account. Juan about had a heart attack right there. Yeah. Our tax guy just got freaked out.
That brings me to a good question, Kevin, because many business owners open up an LLC, and the first thing they do is they start putting their personal assets sometimes into the LLC. For example, I'm going to transfer the lease of my car into my LLC because I'm going to make it, you know, tax deductible. That's another topic. But from the legal standpoint, I mean, they start putting, you know, their cell phone, and then they start putting their lease of their car. Are there certain personal assets that, you know, shouldn't be there in your LLC?
Yes. So I always tell my clients, look, you know, the whole purpose of an LLC is to separate out your business from your personal life. And so, and the reason you want to do that is because there are risks that come from both sides, both the personal life, your personal life and your business. You know, there are a lot of ways you can get sued for your business, but one of the most common ways you get sued is from car accidents. And so lawsuits can come from your personal life as well, and you want to separate out your business assets from that as well. And so if you go and say, oftentimes people will say put their house in their LLC, their personal residence. And not only can that cause problems with your insurance and other things like that, but also you've eliminated that distinction. So if your business gets sued because somebody slips and falls, or because you have a problem with your partnership, or your employees allege you haven't been paying them minimum wage or whatever, now your personal house is part of that LLC, and it's something that they can go after. And if the attorney knows what they're doing, they're going to know that being in your LLC, things like the homestead or whatever shouldn't be applied, and that you put your house on the table in terms of collection efforts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And putting cars in your LLC that really aren't part of your business, just your personal cars, can have some of the same issues. Now, all of a sudden, if you get in a car wreck, they're going to be able to sue your LLC as well, instead of just suing you personally. And if your insurance isn't set up right, your insurance carrier may try and weasel out of it as well, saying, well, you know, we were covering Kevin Johnson, not Kevin Johnson LLC.
And many, you know, entrepreneurs usually use it both ways. You know, they have it, I don't know, 60% business and 40% personal. Do you think that car should be in the LLC or on the personal side?
You know, I would say, just in terms of liability, you know, the tax question is a different one that you would have to
separate
answer.
about. Don't worry about that.
But in terms of liability, I would say that unless it is like a work truck, delivery truck that is almost entirely used for your business or entirely used for your business, I wouldn't put it in your LLC. I would keep it personal, and I would make sure that your insurance coverage is up to date. So is correct. So if you're driving Uber or something like that, make sure that your insurance knows about that and covers it. If you use your car, you know, 3 days a week to deliver flowers for your business, you know, just make sure, talk to your insurance person, and if they don't know if it makes a difference, or that they don't know how to handle it, then get a new insurance person. But I would not put a car in an LLC unless it is, one, purchased by that LLC, so it's owned, you know, it's work equipment, it's something like that, or it's used entirely for that LLC or that business.
Hey,
That's-
Kevin, I have a question.
Mhm.
Many solopreneurs, okay, so say you're a single member LLC
Mhm.
and you're a disregarded entity, which means you're being taxed as a sole proprietorship, right? Which is fine for taxation side, but let's talk about liability issues. Because you are the sole, this is the same thing like attorneys or doctors, right? You guys can get sued for malpractice, right? As a solopreneur, since you're the one that's actually doing your stuff, is the bar set at what, negligence? Do they have to prove that there's negligence to sue you personally, or anybody can sue you at any time?
Right.
You still will get sued, right? And your business may get sued, but you may get sued personally as well.
Right.
That's one fallacy. I think a lot of small business people say, "Oh, well, I'm an LLC. I won't be sued personally." No, they're going to sue you and the business and whatever else they'll do at all. Right? So as far as negligence go, if you're like a one person, you say you're a consultant of some sort, right? Do you recommend errors and omission insurance, or is there some way you can help prevent, what's the standard? Is the standard negligence and you have to prove that there was actual negligence or malice, or what's the legal terminology there?
So, I mean, I always recommend insurance because as you said, none of this is automatic. So even if you do everything right and you form an LLC, you will very often, like you said, still be sued personally. And it will be up to you you'll bring a motion and say, Your Honor, they named me as an individual. I shouldn't be named as an individual. Take me out of this lawsuit. And the other side's going to argue against that. So I always recommend adequate and proper insurance, because not only will it pay any damages that you end up having to pay, but if you buy the right policy, it will pay those costs to defend yourself as well, the legal costs. And so a lot of times people, I know people even of means that will come to me and they have this huge structure set up, LLC over LLC and holding companies and all this stuff. And I say, I mean, good for you. You set up all these things, but even if you run it correctly and maintain all these things, you're going to have to pay to defend all of this.
You still get sued.
If you get sued. And so, even if you're, named personally, and you shouldn't be, you are going to have to pay at least some money to get yourself out of that lawsuit. Now, ideally, if the judge makes the right decision, everything, it should happen pretty quickly right off the bat, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes our judges make mistakes.
Yeah, Kevin, I got sued 8 times in 8 years. How about that in my small business? 8 times in 8 years. Now I always say 4 of them were legit. We had a disagreement, and it was like, sue the company and we'll work this out in court, right? But 4 were completely frivolous lawsuits. I mean, completely frivolous. One alleged that we couldn't sell wholesale. That's what the lawsuit actually said. And I was named with a co-defendant with like 12 other co-defendants, including Donald Trump's company, which was kind of funny, and Disney. I was named in a lawsuit with Trump and Disney. And it's like, we were sued out of Chicago, and it was like ridiculous. Right. And so we just settled, because it's like, it was going to drag on for years, and you can't afford to do that. You want to get that, when you get sued, you want to get done and out and back into business as quick as possible. Isn't that right? That's kind of the strategy, because you don't want to operate in court for your whole life, but you will be sued. So prepare for it.
Right. And so that's, I would say always have insurance, because they will take care of a lot of those suits that have to do with accidents, that have to do with your advertising activities. That's often covered, things like that. So always have insurance. But as far as I think what you asked me basically was, how do you get through an LLC? What triggers that? It's not negligence per se. It's not negligence. That's what LLCs are there to protect against. What it is really is a number of factors, but it all boils down to proving something that's called alter ego. And it's basically proving to the court that this business is not its own separate business, but it's just an alter ego of this person. And so the way you show that is you show, number one, if you can show fraud, that's one thing, that is certainly helpful. But also, showing that they mixed up everything, in terms of business and personal expenses, that they haven't followed any of the corporate, and I say corporate in this case, I'm talking about LLCs, not just corporations, but They haven't followed any of the norms of a corporation or an LLC. They don't have an operating agreement. They aren't, or they are following what the operating
They have a
agreement
bank
says.
account. They're commingling expenses. So if you're disorganized, it's on the road to fraud.
Yeah, that's one of the ways. That's some of the things that you showed. Now that being said, it's not easy to set aside an LLC. And oftentimes what the courts really are looking for is some kind of bad act, some kind of fraud, Yeah. But that's how you do it. And if you want to make sure that you are safe and protected, you want to make sure that it can be simple as just setting up a business account. Go get your EIN number from the IRS and then set up a business account. And you can still pay yourself. People sometimes think, well, they're going to show these draws that I took on the business or my salary. That's fine. But you just want to make sure that it's organized. So you can show all your expenses are being paid out of this account, all your revenues going into this account, and you're paying yourself, X amount, or you're taking these draws on the business. That's fine. But you just want to make sure it's done in an organized and clear way.
Loves it when you're like grocery shopping on your business account, right, Juan? And they show you bought a car on there that's not anywhere in the business asset. They love that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And also now that we have during the pandemic, there's some businesses transitioning. For example, family businesses are coming from. The dad says, "You know what? It was a tough year. Please, kids, take care of the business." How does an LLC play on the succession planning?
So there's a couple ways you can do that. It can be spelled out in the operating agreement. You can, if it's a situation like you laid out where the parent hasn't died or anything, just wants out, they can just sign their interest over to their child or to somebody else. You can put your interest in an LLC in a trust, and then it would pass with your other trust assets outside of probate and everything. And that can be especially useful.
That's a good idea.
LLC is worth a lot of money. Huh?
Definitely need a trust.
It's a pretty good idea.
Children, or you have any assets, you want to avoid probate at all costs.
Right.
Right, counselor?
Exactly.
Yes.
And Reyna's in video, so we
have a question.
Okay.
Yes, we have a question on Facebook. Zoraida Quintero is asking, what do I need to clean houses in Henderson?
Okay. So it depends on what your risks are. And so what I would say is, I would think, number one, am I employing anyone to work underneath me? Or is it just me? If it's just you, your liabilities for that aspect is not as high. If you have employees, employees are often the people that sue you, unfortunately. So that would be a reason to have an LLC. Also, you're going into somebody else's home and you are mopping floors. There's a chance that somebody else could slip and fall, either the owner of the home or somebody else who happens to be working in the home, or if you're cleaning offices, somebody's working in the offices. So
Kevin, you mean my employees who love me, or the chief, that you get sued in a small, I thought they loved me. Look at, I'm paying their salaries. Oh my gosh.
Right.
They actually are going to sue me?
They just might. And, sometimes it's not even under their control. So for instance, if an employee is injured and they use their health insurance to treat themselves, their insurance can decide to subrogate, which means to go after who they think is responsible, which might be you.
Yeah, true.
So sometimes it's not even the employee's choice, or the same thing could happen if somebody else slipped and fell. So if you're cleaning houses, I can think of a couple reasons why you would be sued. And so you may want to think about doing an LLC to protect yourself from those risks. And especially
definitely insurance, they need to be bonded.
For sure.
There's a bond because, say you go into somebody's house in Henderson, they live up in they live in McDonald Highlands, and they have this, $250,000 shower they had imported from Italy, right? And you use the wrong cleaner on that shower, and suddenly it's discolored and whatever, and the homeowner sues you for that. You need an insurance that will take care of that, and that's a bond. So, right. And you can pick up insurance bonds pretty cheap as a cleaning company.
For sure. And like I said earlier, that insurance is also going to pay the cost to defend you. So you may set up your LLC correctly and everything, but if you can't afford to defend it, then you could have other issues that come up.
So LLCs are not just the magic solution. We have to complement it with bonds and errors and omission and proper insurance.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
and I would,
you.
yeah, because you want to make sure you don't want to depend on any one thing. You don't want to depend on your LLC protecting you. You don't want to depend on your insurance only protecting you. You want to have layers here to protect yourself.
Your team, basically a team.
Exactly.
And a good lawyer and a good tax
Lawyer up before you need a lawyer, right, Kevin?
Right.
Listen, when you get sued in Nevada, you got what, 20 days to respond to that lawsuit?
Right. Generally
It's
speaking.
like, oh crap, I'm in trouble. I gotta, and you stew around for a week and you got 10 days left now. You got to hire and you have to respond to that. So find an attorney ahead of time, right, Kevin?
Yeah, have an attorney ready. Go to your insurance company. If you haven't, if the lawsuit seems to be even remotely in the realm of what your insurance covers, even if you're not sure, take it to your insurance. They'll evaluate it, and if there's coverage there, they will refer you out to an attorney who will take care of defending you.
See, that's great advice, Kevin.
If you get sued, usually your registered agent gets the communication, right? That's kind of the main function of your registered agent.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Juan. So make sure that when you set up your LLC, if you set it up yourself, you're going to have to choose a registered agent. And people often put themselves, which is fine, but you want to make sure that you have the correct address and that you're reachable. Sometimes people try and be squirrely there and hide, and it really is not a good idea because people think it will stop them from being served, so it will stop them from being sued. But that's not the case. It just means that the person will have to serve you by what's called publication, which is where they publish it in a newspaper that you're not going to see. So what's going to happen is you're not going to know you've been sued, and then because you don't answer, you're going to lose, and then they're going to get a huge judgment against you.
So do not put the correct and updated address on your registered agent.
You update it every year.
And sometimes that happens because the annual filing for the LLC, where you have to renew your license and things like that, that does not update your registered agent information. So I seen it that you update your address of your LLC, but you move and you updated your business address. You think you have updated your registered agent information as well, but you did not, because that's a separate form that is not filed annually, and you have to, do it yourself.
Right. And if you, there are a lot of companies out there that will set out your LLC for you and will be your registered agent for you. Mm-hmm. That's fine. When my clients set up LLCs through me, my office is the registered agent, which also works because we're always here. So if we get served something for somebody, then, we call them up and say, hey, we got this lawsuit. Here's a copy of it. Let us know if you want it to answer it or not. And they can.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. You've been sued.
Exactly. And they can, we can answer a form or they can take it elsewhere, whatever they want. But the key is that they know about it. But as far as this sources of risk, this is important because this is what you should be thinking about when you're thinking about what kind of business you should be. And the first one we talked about a little bit, employees. They may sue you because they get injured. They may sue you because they allege that they haven't been paid a minimum wage. That happens frequently. They may say, hey, you didn't pay us for these training meetings or whatever. And so you should, so you owe us damages. But employees are a big source of lawsuits. Clients, your own customers, can be a source of lawsuits as well. They allege that your services were inadequate or your product is defective, or they slip and fall. If you have a storefront or a location and they slip and fall inside, or whatever the case may be, that's another huge one. And your partners, investors, they may allege that you've mismanaged the business or that you've embezzled from the business or whatever the case may be. But that's another huge source of lawsuits. An LLC itself is not going to protect you so much from these type of lawsuits because they may sue you on behalf of the LLC. they may say, you know, I represent the LLC, you've defrauded the company, so we're suing you. Vendors are a big source of lawsuits, primarily when you don't pay them. They will come after you, and if you have been careful and you haven't signed any kind of personal guarantees or whatever, and your business folds up, you know, they're going to be pretty much out of luck because they can sue the LLC, but if there's no assets anymore, you closed up shop, they're going to be out of luck.
Along with vendors could be your landlord.
Right.
You know,
Landlord.
you sign the personal guarantee for your lease, and you sign it with vendors. And so when you go when you close the business, you may have to declare bankruptcy if you've got, you know, a 5-year lease out there that you're paying $12,000 a month on, and you just can't pay it at the end.
Right.
Kevin, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. You know, other type of risks, meaning family members, because I learned with you that we have internal and external risks. So sometimes we think about only the liability of the business. So you know, what am I doing? I'm doing landscaping. So I think that my business activity might be risky, so I'm gonna form an LLC. But we never think about the external factors, meaning family members. You know, I have a teenager that doesn't drive very well. So I want to protect my business from my teenager driver. It's not the other way around. And I really like that perspective, because we always think about the business, but not the external factors that can affect our business.
Well, and a lot of family businesses have, you know, they got their nephew coming in and just working on the side, or a sister-in-law in there just doing stuff a couple days a week, and maybe they're paying them cash or whatever. Or maybe they're not even paying them; they're just in there helping. That could their liabilities in the business if they do something or damage something, or you know, oh, hey, hey, thanks for stopping by to see me on the way. Could you drop this off to this one of my clients on the way home, and they hit a kid in a crosswalk or something, like,
Right.
you know, so they're doing business for you, but, you know, are they an employee? Are they not? Are they covered under workers' comp? I don't know. Are they being negligent or not? I mean, there's a lot of risks to having people working in your business that aren't actually on payroll and covered.
Right. That's true. And like Juan said, one of the reasons to separate your business out from your personal life is, you know, you could get sued because your kid causes an accident or something like that. And if you have, you know, a bunch of machinery that might be worth a good amount of money, that can be executed upon by somebody who gets a judgment against you if it's if you don't separate out those assets from your personal life.
It's like a doctor, like a radiologist, let's say, right? Radiologists may have $2 million worth of equipment in their office, right? The doctor typically doesn't own this equipment personally, right? It's held in an LLC at that doctor's office, and the doctor's different because doctors get sued all the time for malpractice, right? And that's why they carry heavy insurance on that type of stuff. So you have to protect your assets.
Right. And the last little point here is the industry. You know, you can find yourself on the wrong side of a state or federal industry being investigated for something. Maybe the SEC comes after you or whatever it may be. And depending on the agency, most agencies actually cannot bring criminal charges. Most agencies just come after you civilly. Like the SEC, for instance, doesn't bring criminal charges against anybody, but they will come after you civilly, and you'll find yourself defending a lawsuit. Now, a lot of these investigations can become criminal, you know, with time, but you know, the industry can be another source of problems for you as well. And so when deciding whether or not you should have an LLC or not, you know, it really becomes kind of a balancing act. You know, do I have employees? Is there any way my clients are likely to sue me? You know, if I'm just making, if I'm knitting yarn ties and selling them on Etsy, you know, I don't have employees. My clients are very unlikely to sue me. I don't have investors. I don't have vendors. Probably okay without an LLC. Would it hurt to have one? No, not at all. But you know, just not many risks there. Whereas if I'm opening a restaurant or something like that, huge risks.
Kevin, I had a hard question for our attorney here.
Okay.
This is tough. And what happens is clients will call me up and they'll go, "Oh my gosh, I went on Silverflume and I'm trying to set up my LLC," and they call me within like 5 minutes of starting that, and they go, "I've got two big questions. It's asking me, am I a restricted LLC or am I a series limited LLC? What are those things?" Right? And I know what a series LLC is. Do you know what a restricted LLC is?
Do I know what a restricted LLC is?
What falls under does somebody go, "Yes, I am a restricted LLC," and I'm pretty much, I tell people, you're not those.
Yeah, I've never set one up. I've never had anyone come to me for a restricted LLC.
I haven't met a single attorney that has. That's why I'm asking. I mean, it's in our statute. So
I don't know. A series LLC you hear of sometimes, especially in land development, but suffice it to say, chances are it's very likely you are neither of those things.
Yes, very correctly. And I always tell people, don't worry about it. If you're successful in your business and your business is throwing off a lot of cash, advisors present themselves to help you deal with this, right? Whether it's CPAs, attorneys, people that help you with all this. Absolutely. So yeah, the series limited is kind of interesting, but most people aren't. It's often used as like landlords. So if you have 12 rental properties, instead of filing 12 separate LLC fees a year that you have to do for those, you can put those into one, but an attorney has to write it so that there's a series of items, but they're kept separate as far as their liability goes.
Yeah, and that can be, people often ask me, because I do a lot of work with people who happen to own a couple rental properties or whatever. And we don't often do series LLCs, and the reason is because it requires even another level of caution.
Yes.
Whereas not only do you have to set it up correctly, but you have to maintain your accounting and everything separately as well for each division in the series LLC. And your average person just is going to have difficulty doing that, and unless they have like an accountant on staff or something. And so I generally tell people, it's better probably to have one LLC with all your property so that you separate it out from your personal life, but then you can make sure your insurance coverage is such that the chances of a lawsuit passing the coverage for one property and going after another is minimal.
Is minimal, unless you own like a dozen properties or more or something like that. In that case, definitely,
And I wanted to get to that point because do you have proper coverage? And that relates to insurance. Even though we do taxes every year, we might renew the license of the LLC every year. You should also review your coverage every single year and keep the good relationship with your insurance agent to do this. Sometimes you paid up that property. Sometimes you took a mortgage out of that property. So definitely insurance, it's a must review item every single year. And it complements the LLC, right? I mean, the LLC is not the final solution, the magic pill. It is part of the solution.
Yep.
Besides the bond and the insurance. And when we talk about insurance and also talk about contracts, there's a lot of negotiation going on right now in the pandemic. I've seen some clients, just handshake some agreements, with the landlords, with the lease agreements. Hey, you know what? Just pay me $1,000 this month, and we're gonna be okay until next month. But there's nothing in writing. I mean, I think that the negotiations, we understand that everybody's being very comprehensive about the situation, but that doesn't mean that we should not put things in writing, right?
Right. So the pandemic has been tricky for commercial businesses because of all the action that's been taken, it either hasn't applied to commercial people or it's been unclear if it does or for how long. It's been difficult. And so the first issue is that a lot of people turn to was insurance coverage. I have this insurance policy. Does it cover COVID and government shutdowns due to COVID? And what we have found, and I've looked at a lot of insurance policies over the last little bit, is probably 80 or 90% of them have exclusions that made any kind of coverage under COVID, any kind of business interruption coverage due to COVID. It just made it so it just didn't apply. You either had specific exemptions due to viruses, but even that wasn't the end of the road. You had further exemptions due to government action, things like that. So a lot of insurance policies where people thought they were covered for things like COVID and government ordered shutdowns, it just ended up not being true. You know, the coverage wasn't there when people tried to make their claims. And so you want to make sure that your insurance policy covers what you think it does. And it's too late really now for COVID. You know, it's going to be very difficult to get a policy now that covers that type of shutdown again. But you just want to make sure that your business covers what you think it does. So if you're cleaning, like the example we had earlier, if you're cleaning homes, you know, you want to make sure that your coverage is for, you know, bodily injury to employees or to others, because that's the most likely thing that's going to happen. You know, whereas if you have a policy that actually only covers, you know, advertising industry, advertising injury, sorry, you know, that's not going to do you much good. But so the lesson from COVID-19 insurance-wise is to make sure that your insurance covers what you think it does. And oftentimes, if it doesn't, if you buy a policy that has an exclusion, you can oftentimes go back to the insurance company and say, I want that covered. And they'll tell you how much it'll cost. They'll say, yeah, I know that, you know, property damage is excluded from this coverage, but I want it, you know, and they'll say, fine, it's going to cost you, you know, $300 a year more or whatever. So just make sure
another insurance that is playing a big role right now is cybersecurity, and definitely ransom and things like that, which is another, you know, run your antivirus frequently.
You know, what happens if your data gets compromised and all your customers' data is stolen and they sue you for it? You know,
they sue you for it.
Want to make sure you have coverage where you think you have coverage. And as far as negotiations, this has been really difficult. There are a couple things that come into play here. The first one is what are called force majeure clauses, and that's a fancy word for basically like acts of God in a contract. So a force majeure clause will say, you know, that this lease is void if there's an earthquake or blah, blah, blah. It'll list all these different things or any other act of God. You want to make sure you review that language carefully, because there are people whose force majeure clauses covered something like pandemics, and there are people whose force majeure clauses were drafted without them realizing it very narrowly, or said that one I've seen a few times now says that this covers any breach except for the failure to pay. So, you know, for instance, if the place is blown up or something from a volcano, you know, you're not responsible for that damage, but you still got to pay.
Yeah.
You know? So you got to make sure that when you sign a lease, and if you're renegotiating a lease right now, you want to make sure that those clauses are drafted broadly to your benefit, so that if for whatever reason you can't operate due to some third party, you know, the government stepping in or whatever, that you don't have to pay lease during that time. You don't have to pay your rent during that time, or you can get out of it. And there are other contractual defenses that have been brought up: impossibility, frustration of purpose, things like that. We haven't seen a ton of success with those so far. You know, they've come up in a few of my cases thus far, but really, you know, the courts tend to default to what's written in the contract. And, you know, if some third party act or some pandemic or something happens that destroys your business, you know, that's
too bad.
That stinks, but you know, the contract says what it says. Now, the flip side of that, a lot of landlords, the smarter ones, are understanding that you know, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. You may not want to just throw all your tenants out, because who knows, you know, what the economy is going to be like. Who knows if it'll be easier to lease your space, and especially with properties that aren't quite as hot as others, you know, aren't quite as popular. You know, a lot of landlords are negotiating with their tenants about their leases and how they can stay and what they need to pay and things like that. and how the back rent is going to be paid back, if it's going to be paid back, things like that. And this is actually a huge opportunity for my clients that are leasing, because number one, it keeps them from getting thrown out, which is good. But number two, it can allow them to remedy some errors that were in the original lease, because there is something that's called accord and satisfaction. And what that means is if you have one contract and for whatever reason, because it's not working for one or both of you, or something happens, you negotiate a different deal, then that's called an accord and satisfaction. And so that second contract can supersede the first. It can also not do that. And some landlords that are savvy, I've noticed, will put language in there that says this does not supersede our previous lease. After this year or whatever it is, we go back to the old terms.
The old terms, yeah.
But it's something you can be aware of, and you can say, if there's some issue with the previous lease, something you don't like, then you can negotiate for a new lease that would supersede the old lease.
That's a very important detail.
Right.
That's a good one.
That being said, there is nothing right now, unfortunately, that requires a landlord to be reasonable with you, to negotiate with you, to not evict you from their storefront or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, people say, well, what I've been asked probably 100 times, what can I do with my landlord? And really what it boils down to is you can try and negotiate a solution that works for you in terms of
in writing.
Right, in writing what you pay moving forward. Even if it's not in writing, you can still sometimes argue accord and satisfaction, especially if they abide by it. So it's gonna be hard for them to argue that you didn't have a new deal if you go from paying $10,000 a month to $5,000 a month, and they accept it, they're fine with it, for 6 months. Then then you could say, you can show by your course of conduct, you can show, look, we had a new deal. Now that's not ideal, because they can say, that's not true. I accepted that rent, but I never agreed to, now you owe me all this back rent, and that can go either way. So you certainly want to have it in writing if possible. But that's basically where we're at right now. It's just a matter of trying to work it out, trying to come up with a solution that works, that they'll agree to, and trying to sign, a new lease if you can. But unfortunately, I have had clients, everything from large clients in fancy properties, your town squares, your Tivoli Square, whatever it's called, to smaller properties, and some have been able to work things out and some haven't. It's been difficult.
Definitely, it's a good time to communicate and keep all documentation in order.
Right.
If you started your LLC or you are negotiating with a landlord and things like that.
We're glad to have all you guys here. If you have any additional questions, Kevin, how can they reach you?
So you can reach me a couple different ways. My office number is 702-823-3500. You can call me, or you can email me at kjohnson, just the letter K, JOHNSON, at cohenjohnson.com. That's COHEN Johnson.com.
Johnson.com. As a final wrap up, small business people often, speak ill of attorneys. I'll say that, right? People are like, oh, this is going to cost me a fortune. Every time I call my attorney, it costs money. This is terrible. You really do need an attorney, okay? And they should be a valued member of your management team. Whoever you have as an attorney, you should have, and you should have them on speed dial for these cases we're just talking about. When you get sued, that's not the time to find your attorney, okay? You need to have your attorney already set up, have the fee structure in place, know how much it's going to cost you, and trust the person that you're working with, right? Kevin, I'm sure would vouch to say, if he has an ongoing relationship with a client, that's the best case scenario, because he knows your business already. He knows what you're going through. So find your attorney ahead of time. We all like to joke around about we hate attorneys, but when you need an attorney, you really need an attorney. Okay. Do not try to do this yourself. Just like a tax specialist. If you get in trouble with your taxes, you better call somebody like Juan, right? You need somebody on your side that knows, because they live, eat, and breathe this stuff every single day. You're doing whatever you're doing in your business. Your attorney's looking out for your best interest in everything. So make sure to have that set up. I'm just gonna put my final plug for the business of lawyering. That's very good. So counselor, you're doing a great job. And any final words, Kevin, that you can say? Any final advice?
I guess I would just say, just to be mindful of what you're doing. You see, a lot of times people just happen to fall into a business, it grows for them unexpectedly or whatever. Take a second, think about what you're doing, think about what your risks are, and make some plans to cover them.
Great advice, great advice.